July has been a difficult month for me. I spent the entire month feeling stuck, trapped in a limbo of uncertainty, unsure of what I was waiting for or what the future held. And on my 26th birthday, I found myself in Northern Ireland with no plans, desperate for nature to solve all my problems. Probably just wanted to find a purpose, just wanted to make life make sense. After a day of exploring Belfast, I knew it was time to get out of the city. The realization that my rail card was useless here and that there wasn't a £2 bus fare cap served as a reminder of how big the UK is and how different things are outside of England. But at this point, anything that would take me away from the bustle of the city and into the embrace of nature was welcome. The coastline at Ballycastle already promised to be stunning, but first I needed to get breakfast. After being properly fueled, I was eager to start the adventure, only to find out I would be walking along the BC roads with no pedestrian path, which wasn't enjoyable at all. Coaches and cars zoomed past, making me long to put this part of the journey behind me. Yet the road seemed to stretch on endlessly. This wasn't the wilderness I had hoped for. And I was still grappling with the idea of a car-centric lifestyle. I've never had a driver's license before because I never needed one. So far, day one wasn't quite working out as I had imagined. After a slight detour, we finally arrived at our first spot, Kimbain Castle. I hadn't expected much from it, but to my surprise, I ended up really liking it. Though in ruins, the castle perched majestically on the tall white cliff by the sea. It had been a while since I last saw the ocean, and there was something profoundly soothing about just sitting by the shore, listening to the rhythmic sound of the waves. As we continued our journey, I was relieved to finally come across a footpath, until it led us straight to a large car park and some stylish platforms jutting out from the cliff. Naturally, I joined the crowd to see what views they offered. The viewpoint provided a clear overlook of the Carrick-a-Reid rope bridge. Oh, so the Causeway Coast is that kind of coastline, much more developed than I had imagined. From a distance, we could see a long queue of visitors waiting to cross the famous footbridge, a far cry from the lonesome scenes I'd seen in photos online. As we got closer to the bridge, we were greeted by signs reminding us that pre-booking was required to cross. A ticket office stood guard, blocking the path toward the bridge. Carricker Reed was clearly a proper tourist attraction. Since we hadn't planned to pay for the crossing, we simply followed the well-paved path to another viewpoint, where we could get a closer look at the bridge. I searched for campsites and bothies in the area before we started to walk, only to find that each required a different membership to book. From the maps, it was clear there were quite a few villages and signs of civilization along the coast, making me unsure if wild camping would be feasible. In the end, I decided to splurge on a B&B instead. That was on me for planning this trip so spontaneously. Today's journey didn't feel like the walker-friendly route it advertised to be. I could have easily taken the bus or joined a day tour and seen the same views without the hassle. I was left wondering why I was here. This definitely wasn't what I was searching for. The B&B we stayed at last night turned out to be a real gem. The interior design was exactly the kind of cozy, charming style I love. The breakfast was just as delightful, homemade, hearty, and served with a warmth that made us feel right at home. I was really looking forward to today. The routes ahead seemed more straightforward, with the plan being to simply follow the coastline until we reached the famous Giant's Causeway. I hoped this meant we could avoid any more road walking, which had been a bit of a drag the day before. As we headed out towards the coast, a light drizzle began to fall. The peculiar rock formations along the shore immediately caught my attention, reminding me of the rugged coastline of Green Island in Taiwan. The smell of the ocean was familiar and comforting, a sense that brought back memories of home. Yet, the sight of sheep and cows grazing along the path was a clear reminder that I was still very much in the UK. The rock formations were truly fascinating. They twisted and turned into all sorts of interesting shapes, with some forming natural arches that looked almost sculpted by hand. One formation in particular stood out, a massive rock that had eroded into the unmistakable shape of an elephant. As we reached the end of the pasture, we encountered a small segment of rocky path that had been submerged by the high tide. It's definitely something to be mindful of. Checking off the tide schedule beforehand would be wise to avoid getting stranded or taking a detour. It had been a long time since I'd seen a proper beach, with such soft, fine sand underfoot. There's something incredibly soothing about watching the waves crash onto the shore, their flow almost hypnotic. As we walked along the beach, the clouds began to part, and the sun finally emerged, bathing us in its warmth. At the far end of a long sandy stretch, we spotted a small village nestled by the sea. We decided to take a break and stopped at a cozy little cafe where we ordered some much-needed food and drinks. As we continued our journey, the path softened underfoot, covered in short grasses. A welcome change from yesterday's terrain. Before long, we spotted the first of the hexagonal columns along the shore, signaling the geological wonders ahead. The weather remained unpredictable, alternating between sudden showers and bursts of sunshine that brought out the deep blue of the sea. Finally, I found myself standing atop the majestic cliffs I had envisioned, the coastline stretching out before me. As we passed the Zurich castle, the landscape grew even more dramatic, with layers of rocky cliffs interspersed with red clay, reminiscent of Iceland's rugged beauty. The hexagonal columns became more prominent, guiding us closer to the giant's causeway. As we reached a cliff overlooking the famous Giant's Causeway, the scene felt a bit anticlimactic. The shore was crowded with visitors, far from the solitary experience I had imagined. By the time we reached the visitor center, it began pouring rain. We decided to check into our nearby hostel first, hoping the weather would clear up by the evening. The hostel wasn't that great, honestly, but given its relatively low price for the area, I couldn't really complain. My inner photographer was still optimistic, hoping to catch a decent sunset and maybe even a sunrise, with the added hope that the crowds would thin out later in the day. Though vastly different in their origins, the Giant's Causeway reminded me of my visit to Stonehenge. Both places have been transformed into well-managed tourist attractions, complete with a nicely designed visitor centers and well-maintained infrastructure. While this makes them more accessible, it also lends them an air of artificiality. The causeway felt almost like an attraction in a theme park than a raw, untamed nature wonder. As the rain subsided, we headed back down to the causeway for sunset. Standing directly on the columns, seeing them up close, was an entirely different experience. The golden light of the setting sun reflected off the crashing waves, casting a warm glow on the hexagonal rocks and accentuating their unique shapes. In that moment, the causeway transformed from a crowded tourist spot into something almost magical. The scene brought back memories of the UNESCO Geopark in Sai Kung, Hong Kong, with its own dramatic rock formations. Yet the Giant's Causeway was different enough to make this trip feel worthwhile. Standing on those ancient columns, bathed in the soft light of sunset, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that made all the challenges of the journey worthwhile. This was what I had came here for. Feeling satisfied with last night's sunset, I decided to skip the sunrise, knowing the sun would be hidden behind the ridge anyway. Hunger set in quickly, but the restaurant nearby didn't offer breakfast or dinner, so we set off early toward Bushmills. The walk along the railway was unexpectedly refreshing, offering a change of pace from the previous day's rugged coastal paths. As we continued, Runcorrie Beach came into view, with the quaint village of Ballintoy behind us and the railway stretching out in front. It was a scene straight out of a postcard, something I don't get to see every day. Unfortunately, it was still too early to catch a train, as the local infrastructure seemed more geared towards day trippers, with everything only opening around midday. Despite this, walking in the soft morning sun was a peaceful experience. The early hours provided a rare tranquility, allowing me to soak in the views in quiet reflection. Not long after we left Bushmills, I spotted a castle in the distance. Unlike the ruins we had seen over the past 2 days, this one was enormous and appeared well maintained. The imposing structure looked as though it had stepped straight out of history, and I could easily imagine it had fascinating stories to tell. However, as we approached, I noticed a hefty entrance fee, a result of its fame as a filming location for Game of Thrones. Not particularly interested in the touristy sides of things, we decided to continue our way. The next viewpoint caught my attention far more. It offered a breathtaking panorama of white cliffs with natural arches and rock columns, reminiscent of the South Downs Way. The turquoise, crystal-clear water below allowed us to see straight to the ocean floor. As the rain finally ceased, the crowds began to pour onto the viewpoint, seemingly appearing out of nowhere. It struck me then, they had all been waiting in their cars, escaping the downpour. Their absence had given us a brief moment of solitude with the stunning views, a quiet pause before the world rejoined us. Portrush came into view behind the white cliffs, and seeing the town in the distance brought a sense of relief as we were starting to feel the strain of the day. The 3-kilometer walk along White Rocks Beach felt endless, especially with the strong headwind pushing against us. Still, I couldn't help but enjoy the sea breeze as it gently caressed my face, a soothing reminder of the ocean's presence. As we neared Portrush, we stumbled upon an amusement park. It sounded like fun, and with no entrance fee, we decided to take a look. Despite its unassuming exterior, the park managed to pack a lot into its small space. We took a moment to shoot some hoops, indulging in a bit of light-hearted fun before continuing our way. The route from Portstewart to Portstewart was rather unremarkable. It was a stretch marked by intermittent rain and persistent buzz of midges. We passed through several golf courses, which were surprisingly busy on a weekday afternoon. As we neared the end of our journey, I found myself reluctant for the walk to conclude, yet it seemed to just fizzle out. There were no statues or grand signs marking the end of the Causeway Coast path, just a quiet, unceremonious finish. It struck me that, much like this ending, life often changes direction without fanfare or warning. It was a subdued conclusion to a journey that had been anything but ordinary. Ironically, it was during a downpour at Ballycastle that I received an invitation for a job interview. I completed the interview as soon as I got back to London, and to my surprise received the job offer the very same day. Everyone told me it would work out fine eventually, but I struggled to believe it. I hated feeling like fate wasn't in my hands, the lack of control gnawing at me. But in the end, it did work out. The journey wasn't the most glorious. Hard work doesn't always reward you with great feels along the way. But even so, reaching the destination made it all worthwhile.